My mom, she's about as tall as a house plant. Like, she's a very small woman, but she was at the market one day and someone scrawled on something, and put on her car, "If I ever see this cross again, I'll kill you."
I have never read a book quite like this. This was an exciting read, and we've got the author in here. Listen to this. Everything said is untrue. I didn't even know what it meant, but it's a true story about our author sitting right here. Here's how it starts. And I read this out loud to Ann.
Yeah, he did.
When we got the book, I'm like, oh, listen to this. This grabs you. It says, all Persians are liars and lying is a sin. That's what the kids in Mrs. Miller's class think, but I'm the only Persian they've ever met, so I don't know where they got that idea. I mean, that's the opening paragraph. You are a writer, dude.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's sort of playing with this idea. I mean, anytime you have a character who's trying to tell you this big story and some of it is really grand and has all kinds of what you'd call coincidences or miracles or whatever, he's sort of immediately trying to address the skepticism of somebody who's just not going to believe it. And so he says, all right, well, everybody thinks I'm a liar, but I don't know what to tell you. It's what happened. So the reason it starts there is because, as I said, when you're standing in front of a classroom and you're trying to express, so like the fundamental question, which is, okay, so you're this little refugee from Iran. Why did you come here? The question is always why, right? And you say, well, we came here because we were refugees and we got asylum because a wonderful family in Edmond, Oklahoma sponsored us. And you say, okay, so then why were you refugees? And you say, well, we were refugees because my mother converted from Islam to Christianity, and that's a capital crime in Iran, which means if you're captured and found guilty of apostasy in the Islamic courts, then you'll be put to death. And you're like, okay, well, why did she commit a capital crime?
Right there.
Right.
Aren't kids like, I'm assuming that people, their jaws are kind of open and what?
Right. But there's also a lot of questions because
I bet.
Just every noun I just said requires some explanation. Wait, Islamic courts? It's like, well, yeah, it's a theocracy over there, which means there are both legal courts and theological courts, and you can be found guilty of religious crimes. And so you're kind of explaining a lot. You find yourself in that position where you're telling the story and you say, okay, well, then why did she do that? And you say, well, that's a bigger question. Why did she, commit this crime? It's like, well, she'd been captured by the secret police and they told her that they wanted to know the names of all the people in the underground church where she was attending or they would kill her and her kids. It's like, well, why? And you're like, okay, let me go back. She joined the underground church because she had converted when we as a family had gone to the United Kingdom in order to attend a wedding. And now my mother, who at that time was a very devout Muslim, she was a Quranic scholar. A lot of people think we came here because a lot of Persians came here after there was an Islamic revolution in the 70s. My mother was on the side of the revolution. She actually was very, very devout. And so when we go to the United Kingdom, it's a Christian nation. They're going to get married in a church. They had converted to Christianity. And so my mother at first was very, hostile to that notion. And she was kind of, a standoffish, I guess you'd say, with the church, and the idea is, okay, we're going to attend the wedding, but nothing more. So while we're there, quite a few things happen, and this is a category in the book. There are moments where you go, here's a moment where you don't have to believe in miracles, but then I'm just going to tell you a bunch of coincidental things that happen, and we can just chalk it up to that if you like. As they were sort of helping with the wedding, my sister was going to the daycare, and then there was a little boy there who, who knows why little kids do anything, but he had sort of decided that he's going to trick her. He sort of says, hey, let me tell you something, that he's kind of standing at the door jamb. And he says, will you stick your finger in this little door jamb? And my sister, fairly gullible thing to do. She does. It sticks her pinky in there, and he slams the door, and it severs the finger. And just a horrible thing to hear. You get a call from your parents and stuff. And so my mother rushes to the hospital. Everything's fine. They sew it back on. It's just, scary and traumatic. And
everything's fine. They sew her finger back on.
It's the tip. Yeah. Let's not get crazy here. I come back, and it's the return that's important, because my grandmother, her apartment, we were sort of staying there, and my sister goes, they put her in my grandma's bed, and just like, she's kind of in that post-traumatic lull, and she takes, they're just going to have her take a nap, and we were all in the living room, and not 30 minutes later, she comes back out, and she's this sort of happy child, as the story goes, and everyone's kind of wondering what's happened. Is the emotional elasticity of a child so good that she's bounced back already, or is she? And so everyone's like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And she sort of describes this moment that everybody still wonders about, because she says, well, there was this man in my room and he was sitting at the corner of my bed and he said that everything's going to be okay and that I'm his now. And she just proceeds to describe him more. And so for a little kid to make this description, it didn't feel as if it was coming from somewhere in her unconscious. It felt fairly authentic. And so my grandmother said, who was a Christian, said, you're just, that sounds exactly like Jesus. That's, that sounds, and she goes, okay, well, I'm a Christian now. And so, famously, my sister is very precocious, very smart, very stubborn. And so my mother has this sudden realization that we're about to go back to Muslim Iran, where there's a secret police. It's not the kind of place where a 6-year-old can skip around and tell a story about her finger and Jesus. And it really was almost the inciting incident for all this, but in and of itself, it was kind of this just remarkable afternoon, right?
Yeah.
But then what it really kicks off is this force that my mother now can't be standoffish with that church. She's not just going to attend. Now she's got to kind of attend to this. She's got to deal with it. By that I mean quite literally, she has to read the Bible and say, okay, well, what is my grandmother doing? What is happening?
Yeah.
And so when she reads it, one of the things she always describes is that a lucky factor in her life was that she had done all that reading of the Quran, because there are plenty of people who just are culturally what they are. Whether that be Muslim or Christian or whatever they are, that's just the world they're in. That's their culture. They don't know exactly what the specifics are of their faith. And so sometimes you can have these moments where you'll tell someone, especially a Muslim, you can tell them about Christ, and they'll be like, yeah, he's a good teacher. We venerate him too.
Yeah.
And you go, right, I understand that, but there's a difference that makes a difference here. And for her, that was a very, very clear difference as she was reading that Bible. And so she converted during that time, specifically because as she's reading it, she's making that comparison and contrasting it and saying, this is the truth. I'm seeing it. And so we returned to Iran at that point from that wedding. And as I said, that was the inciting incident, because now we're back and she's meeting up with a missionary there, helping.
This is a big deal.
Yeah, so she has this
a big deal.
And she knew how big a deal it was.
Yes, she
in
did.
Iran, right?
She did. Although my mom, I tell people she's about as tall as a house plant. She's a very, very small woman, but also I've seen her outwork college students. She's a toughie, and
that would be her.
Yeah, right.
And she's smart. She's a physician.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even though she knew about that danger, but one episode I always talk about is because she was also so zealous and completely unafraid in what might be, from the world's perspective, considered a reckless way. She just put a cross up hanging from her rearview mirror.
Come on.
Which is nuts. It's a nuts thing to do.
Yes.
And she was at the market one day, and there was someone scrawled on something, and put on her car, if I ever see this cross again, I'll kill you. It was this kind of really aggressive thing to see, the kind of thing that, most people would sort of take it down. Why? It's not worth it. Just go to the market, get your eggs and come back. And she did take it down, and she put up a bigger one.
Really?
Yeah.
This says everything we need to know about your mom.
Right. Yeah. And I was like, I would never do that. I'm 4 times her size. I would still just kind of, caution might prevail, but that's not what she was up to. She was, she was going to job interviews as a doctor for this hospital, and witnessing to the interviewer, which is, again, in a city that is kind of being run by the secret police, which have the most ominous name in the world. They're called the Committee. The comité.
The committee.
Yeah, the committee. And if you get brought before the committee, there is no desk between you. It is not a well-lit interviewing space. So it's just such a terrifying panopticon. Everybody is telling on everybody. If you're throwing out beer bottles in the trash, the neighbor ladies might all of a sudden see it, and all this again that night you might get raided. It's such a tight and fear-controlled environment, and for her to kind of do those fearless things always has always been a really...
What is your dad thinking?
Oh, he thinks she's gone crazy. Every single time I've ever spoken to him on the phone said, religion has ruined my life. Your mother didn't need to do any of this. And you know, to jump to that moment, she, you know, one day she's in that market again, and some men in you know, not in uniform, pull up in a van and throw her in, and
the committee showed up.
The committee, yeah, and they took her to a safe house and started to interrogate her, and told her, of course, that what I said, which is that we want the names of the underground church, or we'll kill you and your kids. And they basically just kicked her out of the safe house for her to walk home. I enter the scene when my dad picks me up from kindergarten, and we come home, and my mother is, you know, this is a loaded term, but accurate for the moment. Like, she is absolutely hysterical. Like, doesn't know what to put in a suitcase, and doesn't know where to go. Doesn't even know how it's going to happen. And so there begins another series of miracles that I'll sort of leave for the book. But effectively, it's a lot of logistics. It's a lot of like, how do you get out of a country that is overseen by a totalitarian theocracy? How do you escape? Do you bribe everybody? Do you just go to the airport? And, you know, we went to an airport sort of in some ways knowing we were going to get, you know, flagged. And eventually, you know, that was this moment where I realized as a young child that, like, oh, my father has no real interest in this situation.
He's not coming.
He's leaving. Yeah, he's staying, and we're leaving. And so I didn't even understand divorce at that point. I thought my dad was like going to come later when he sold our house or something. And
let me ask you, we've got like a minute left.
Oh, goodness.
As a little boy, were you scared?
Yeah, I used to sleep under my bed for a long time because I thought that would trick the people who ran into my room. So your mom's fear and some of the things of getting you guys out, you felt it as a child. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's an adventurous quality of seeing new places and things like that. But fundamentally, yeah, I had always assumed there were, and in a kid's mind, it's like the bad men are after me, right? It's that sort of thing. So I was very keen on trying to get strong, get good at self-defense, you know, hide properly and well. So yeah, that would be a part of the childhood.
Well, I guess we got to stay tuned for part 2, part 5 or part 25. I don't know how far it's going to go, but that's tomorrow.